Good morning, everyone. This is the November 8th, Tuesday morning meeting, open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, convening by a video conference pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 as extended on July 16th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating remotely via Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Excuse me. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name who acts inappropriately. For ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Vince Murphy, to be read into the meeting record. His email is vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated in that agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. We know Gary Beller is not able to attend today. Sarah Boyce?
Here.
Peter Brace?
Here.
Matt Fee?
Here.
We know Rachel Freeman is not expected to attend today. Ian Golding?
Yes.
Jen Carberg?
Here.
I do not see, there's Christy. Hello, it's good morning.
Yep. Here.
Joanna Roach is not able to attend. Joe Topham?
Here.
Okay, and staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy?
Here.
And Jeff Carlson?
Good morning.
Good morning. We do not have any anticipated speakers on the agenda, so each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. And the first item on our agenda, a little bit of explanation. So we had drafted a new version of the letter that did not go out in the packet last week. The packet has been updated to include it as of a short time ago, so it is available to the public. So we do have that letter. We know that the members of the committee haven't seen it. So the beginning of our discussion will focus on the parts of the letter that we already have seen, and then we'll move forward from there as the discussion goes on. We may need to bring up the letter that was drafted in the interim as well. So let's start, Vince, with the letter that Ian presented that was in the packet for our meeting 2 weeks ago that has not had any further updates. And we wanted to focus on the last paragraph of that letter. Jeff Carlson, the Director of the Natural Resources Department, had some input for us on that.
One moment, I just have to get that up.
Yeah. And Jeff, thank you for joining us this morning.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Apologies. I think I have it now. Here it is. Open. Yes. Okay. So this is the one Ian sent about this day 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Jeff, if you want to start off, you had some comments.
All right. Yeah, I don't think I really have a lot of comments. I was just hopefully wanting to clarify the process that Chapter 91 uses to review these, because I know it can be kind of confusing, and we love to do permits for permits.
Excuse me, Vince, the screen sharing stopped. Can you bring that back up?
All right, I'll keep talking while he's doing it. I know our computers in the building today feel like they're running on dial-up today because they're just kind of going slow. So, yeah, Vince asked me to take a look at the letter, and I know, having helped the Concom write their letter to Mass Waterways, I just had a question and kind of looking at the process for what's there. And at the end of the letter, the request is that DEP waterways require the owners to obtain a license for reconstruction under Chapter 91 in advance of applying before the Conservation Commission. And the only reason I bring it up is because right now, to apply for that license through Mass Waterways, you have to have a current order of conditions to file that application. So it's a little bit of a process question for how you would apply without the permit that you need the permit to apply. So it's a little like a chicken and egg kind of thing here. I think that there are other ways to maybe tackle it and look at it a little bit. And I know at the Concom level, we've talked about, doing a little better job looking at our local wetland regulations and performance standards and adding some things to reflect the requirements of Chapter 91 in our local regulations. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't been a part of all your conversations, but I think to me, the question that's coming up is how we start dealing with these license structures that are old, that were permitted sometimes anywhere from 25 to 30 years ago, and modernize their license to be compliant with Chapter 91. So I think that's a little bit different of a question, but when I read that was just my concern, is that doing things out of order may cause problem in requesting that. But I think we'd all like the answer of how we should be making sure that things are meeting 2022 and 2023 standards for old licenses. So I guess I'm happy to take questions on this. I know Chapter 91 can be kind of confusing, or provide any additional thoughts that you guys have. I just don't want to talk for forever and bore everyone to pieces.
Okay, so for background, Jeff, the original topic that came to us was to write a letter of support for the letter that the Concom submitted in August. And I think that, that's valid for this committee, falls within the charge of reviewing existing regulations and identifying disconnects in how things need to be done and versus how things are done. But if as you're pointing out, that we're really in this statement challenging the process of how things are done, in my mind, that would need to be worked through with the Concom. It's not something that we would take directly to DEP or through the select board to DEP without having gone through considerable discussion with Concom about how we would support them, because supporting them is the goal that we have here. So I don't know if that helps clarify what we're trying to do.
No, it definitely does. And again, I mean, you guys can take the action that you guys feel appropriate. I just know when I reviewed it, I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that right now, the current process requires having a permit from the Concom prior to applying for a Chapter 91 license. So I don't think they would be able to get a license before appearing before the Concom. I know it's kind of confusing, but.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Comments or questions, Ian?
Yes. So Jeff, thank you for pointing that out. And I would suggest that the sentence be changed. We ask that Mass DEP require property owners on Nantucket in the future to be in compliance when applying for a license under reconstruction under Chapter 91. But when appearing before the Nantucket Conservation Commission. So I think that deals with it effectively. And I would like to put it to a vote.
So Vince is trying to edit on the screen, so we'll give him a minute and make sure that we're capturing what you're saying, Ian.
Yes. Yes.
So in the future, to be in compliance, and I think it was with the existing Chapter 91 license.
Yes. Yes.
I'll second it for discussion.
Well, hang on,
Thank you.
we're not quite ready. Appreciate that, Matt.
So be in compliance with the existing Chapter 91 license requirements.
Okay, so we need the word requirements in there,
Yeah.
Vince. And then you can delete the next part that says a
Yeah.
license for reconstruction under Chapter 91.
Yeah.
Because we just
Before-
replaced that.
yeah.
All right, so it says, we ask that Mass DEP require property owners on Nantucket in the future, I think, Vince, to be in compliance with the existing Chapter 91 license requirement in advance before appearing before the Nantucket Conservation Committee.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you, Jeff, because I think that's a key point.
So
Just-
Jeff, does that fit within the existing process? You know, it doesn't create any conflicts. Is that what, I guess is what I'm asking.
No, I think at that point, you're simply asking for a statement that it's compliant with the existing license. I think
Okay.
that's.
Great.
Can I ask a question
Dennis,
quickly? This is the paragraph that has been at issue. Fine, we're fixing that. This is the version of the
Right.
letter that Ian sent 2 weeks ago. You're happy with this one, not the one that?
No,
Okay,
no.
fine.
So I'm getting to that. All right, so we have, this paragraph has been changed. Vince, can you do a copy of this paragraph?
And go to the other document.
Yes, and go to the other document and paste it in that.
Yes.
Because at our last meeting, this document was intended to be edited in other areas.
Yeah. So
which I-
effectively, this goes away and gets replaced with what we just wrote, the whole paragraph.
Right, yeah, it should be a paragraph for paragraph swap.
Correct. And now it's unedited. It's just went in as is.
Well, we're seeing the Ian's original letter. We're not seeing
Okay,
it
fine.
there.
One moment.
All right, thank you, everybody, for your indulgence as we work through this.
Okay, now this is the one that you worked on. This is that paragraph pasted in to the combined letter.
Okay. All right, so Ian, if you will hold your motion until we are able to review the combined letter, is that acceptable?
Absolutely, Mary. I withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, so again, a bit of background. What I tried to do in the edits, if you remember that I had difficulty with some of the language in the second paragraph and was able to make that more palatable, at least to me. And as I was reflecting on this, I realized that this letter has a much wider audience. And so I wanted to establish the bona fides, if you will, why we're doing this, who we are, what our jurisdiction is, and so on. So I've rewritten, I'm just going to read it out loud so that people aren't straining on the screen too much and that we all have it in the record. So the first paragraph, at the request of its Conservation Commission representative member, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee at its October 25th meeting approved submitting a request asking the Select Board of the Town of Nantucket to join and support the request dated August 11th, 2022 from the Nantucket Conservation Commission for assistance from the Mass DEP Waterways Program to ensure that decisions made locally are consistent with the policies and procedures of Mass DEP Waterways. And so that just added more detail. And then the second paragraph, the Select Board charged the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee with reviewing pertinent existing regulations to include coastal resiliency accommodations, identify any disconnects between regulations and practice and/or conflicts, and recommend ways to achieve alignment, reviewing proposed pertinent regulations for coastal resiliency purposes. That is a quote from what is on our website as our charge from the Select Board. The Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee delivered a coastal resilience plan to the select board, which adopted it on January 12th, 2022. One of the elements of public feedback that the CRP received is the sentiment that nature-based strategies should be implemented wherever feasible, with a clear emphasis on minimizing ecological impacts and maximizing ecological and public access benefits. Preserving Nantucket's beaches and coast into the future for as long as possible should be the primary goal. So that is the quote that Ian had provided from the CRP. So I hope that that language that I've just read out is satisfactory to people. Then we have pasted in the paragraph that we just edited with the change that Ian gave us on that paragraph. And then we have the thank you and signatures from the select board and from the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Comments and discussion, please. Peter?
Yeah, okay. Where are we? Okay. We asked that Mass DEP require property owners on Nantucket in the future to be in compliance with the existing Chapter 91 license. Since Chapter 91 licenses are typically specific to each property, shouldn't we say with their existing Chapter 91 license requirement?
I had the same thought, Peter. So if you think that that's
Well, that's what I think.
Yeah.
But and then Chapter 91 license requirement, I would assume it'd be requirements, right? There would be more than one thing in the license. So I know that's nitpicky, but
there we go.
Does that work for you, Peter?
yes, I'm just throwing out my suggestions.
Ian, are those acceptable?
Yes, Mary, they are. And thank you, everybody, for all the work that's gone into this.
All right, other comments or questions on this letter? Christy?
I'm just looking at that last paragraph that was just adjusted, and I know it says where it says property owners are required to maintain public access along the shore for the purpose of fishing, fouling, and navigation. I didn't know if it would be appropriate to add in public safety access.
This is actually a quote, so we can't.
Okay. Can't adjust that, got it.
But we do have included in the quote at the end is specifies how the property owner will maintain public access.
Okay.
So it's not the same as public safety access, but it
Yeah.
is referenced.
Got it. I always thought that public safety has a little bit of more gravitas, but public access is acceptable. And then the other thing is, I didn't know if there's anywhere that it mentions about if you do any construction or work, whether it's nature-based or not, that it does not alter at all or affect your abutting neighbor's property. I was just trying to think of how to sort of word it or put it in as a reference so that, because I know a lot of times, well, a few times I can think of, there's been a few construction projects that have altered neighbors' frontage. So I just wanted to throw it out there as a thought, if it was something that was missing, or if we thought that that should be something that could be included or not.
So from my perspective, I'm keeping in mind that our intent is to support the Concom in what they are pursuing, and we are not the Concom. I'm also keeping the perspective that sometimes rules are not your friend. So requiring something to be a certain way doesn't allow flexibility and latitude for individual circumstances.
Okay.
So if we were going to propose something like that, not saying that it's good or bad, I would want a more thorough discussion of the impacts and potential repercussions of that. And I think that's outside the scope of this letter.
Understood. Yeah.
Happy to hear others' perspective. Ian?
Yes, through you, if I may, Mary, to Jeff,
Yes.
because Christy, of course, has brought up a really salient point. And I can think of several examples, one before us now, where there's clearly been an impact. Is that something that property owners can bring under our existing regulations, Jeff?
Yes, is the short answer to that. Anyone that feels that they've had an impact to a resource area on their property from an abutter can certainly file a complaint with the commission to be looked into.
And just to clarify, Ian, when you said a matter before us, I think you were referring to the Conservation Commission, not the Coastal Resilience Advisory.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Mayor. I was indeed.
Yeah. All right, any further comments or discussion on this letter?
It's Matt, I just wonder if this is gonna do anything. You know, and I look at it and so we're asking, could you make sure they're in compliance? What if they do nothing? What recourse do we have? What if we never hear a response? Or, you know, is there any follow-up? Have we written in this in a way that we can follow it up? Have we requested something that, I'm just trying to think of how this moves us forward. I mean, I think I'm supportive of it. It's one of my pet peeves that we're losing the access, you know, and I think we have it here for more than just fishing, fouling, navigation, but that's a whole different topic. And so I just, anyway.
Right, and again, I'll say the intent of the letter is to support the letter that the Concom has already issued. This is not a fight that we're taking on through this vehicle of the letter. And again, any other issues outside of supporting the Concom and what they've already requested, I think would require a much greater discussion and investigation that again is outside the scope of this letter. Not saying that that shouldn't happen.
And I agree with that, but I'm asking, you know, I guess I'm asking Ian or Jeff, what in their discussions, how will this help and what's the follow-up if it doesn't? Is I guess what I'm asking. I agree with you, Mary, that we're supporting them and we're not making this our issue. But what is their, hope from this?
Well,
And what's the follow-up?
Okay, so Peter has had his hand up. Peter, if you will stay paused for a moment. Jeff, if you have a response, or Ian, if you have a response to that question.
yes, may I? Because Jeff really hasn't had much to do with this. It was more something that I suggested because I felt that it would help. It might add momentum to our request. And Jeff, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the consensus is that it's a Sisyphean task to get the Mass Waterways Division to move on anything. And so my hope is that coming from the select board, that it is, bringing the Mass Waterways, just bringing to their notice that it isn't only our local conservation commission that is worried about this aspect. And I suppose moving forward, the select board in a few months could ask, well, how come you haven't replied? Which I think would be a great help to the Conservation Commission. So I guess that's part of the reason why I suggested bringing this in the first place. And then when I mentioned it to the Concom, I mean, everybody thought it was a good idea when I mentioned it in commissioners' comments. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. All right, we'll go to Peter.
I just think it's important, and this is, I guess, an answer to Matt. I understand it's not a monumental step and we're not going to control anybody and we're an advisory board, but I think it's important that we tell people where we stand. Like Ian just basically said, it's important that we're recognized as this is what we're for when it comes to it. That we can go back, or whatever is being considered at the time, they can say, yes, the crack was, for this. This is what they're for. This is what they want, instead of them having to come to us and say, well, what do you think about this? Very early on, we said this, and we advocate for this. I just think it's important that we're on record.
Yeah, again, the intent here is to support the Concom and really it's the Concom's bus to drive.
But I'm sorry, I understand that. It is their bus to drive, but we're advisory. We're advising. This is what we advise. And we're not advising you how to drive the bus. We're just saying, here's how we feel.
So, Mary, may I ask through you to Matt? Do you think that the select board will look at this favorably and send it on to the DEP, to the Mass Waterways Division?
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I'm very supportive. It's one, losing access is one of my pet peeves. And so I'm very supportive. I just was sort of, what's the strategy? That's why I wanted everyone to understand what your strategy is. And, and if if the select board have to follow up in 4 or 6 months, please tell us to do so. It is not going to be on a tickler list with Libby or any of us anywhere. So. It should be, but there's so much going on that some of this stuff gets, ends up lower in the priority list.
Thanks, Matt. Vince?
Simple question. Ian, have you had a response since this letter was sent in August? Are you expecting a response?
well, I think I'll defer to Jeff on that.
To date, we haven't.
Thank you. So I guess to abuse my metaphor, we're trying to put a little more gas in the tank of that bus.
Diesel.
All right, if there is no further discussion, Ian, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, so moved.
I'll take that as a motion to submit the letter to the select board for their consideration to send to Mass DEP, seconded by Matt. All right, roll call vote. Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all, and thank you, Jeff, for helping us out.
No problem. Anytime. Good luck with the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
All right, next meeting item is the review and approval of the annual report to be submitted to the select board. So we presented the committee with a draft in August and noted that it would be November before we knew it, and here we are. So the draft has been revised according to the comments from the committee. This was included in the packet that was sent out last week. Are there any further comments on the draft for the annual report? And this gets published in the town's annual report that gets handed out at town meeting. Vince?
So Mary already caught it. I just wanted to point it out. I'm trying to find it out as quick as I can. Ian had a comment about the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee not taking a position on the geotubes. I'm trying to find it.
Go up, Vince. Up.
Yeah, it's the only major change.
Participation in other resilience projects.
Yeah, there it is. CRAC has now taken a position. That's the biggest change from what you saw before. This was Ian's request.
And then I did some consolidating to try and trim the report. I think we were asked for 1 page and we're at 2.5.
Oh, and I took the liberty as well of putting in an image from the CRP. It's the downtown neighborhood flood barrier. And this will be formatted by town administration to fit in the report, however they see fit. So any further comments, edits, questions about the annual report? If there are none, we'll take a motion to submit this.
So move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Jen. Roll call vote. Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Brace.
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Christie Kickham,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longiger, aye. Thank you for that. So we have next a status update on the Coastal Resilience Plan recommendations. So we're approximately 1 year out from when we finalized the plan last November. And thought it would be nice to take a look and see what has happened with each of the 40 recommendations. So Vince prepared a couple of PowerPoint slides for that. Vince, if you're ready to share those. And so this again was sent out with the packet. And I guess any further comments you want to offer, Vince, on these? You want to just go through them one by one? Or
Yeah,
just
so-
any other highlights that you want to mention?
the one update, I went through all of this and I went through it in detail, and then I showed it to Jeff just to kind of say, look, here's this nice little report that we have, just kind of a quick pictorial guide to show where we are and how things are looking. Two things stood out quite quickly. I'm just going to skip to the end. We have some complete, but just about everything in one way or another is in development, and there are several not started, about another half, roughly speaking. There's one project that I could probably add to the in development list because I totally forgot I worked on it in January. It's the numerical modeling study. This is in here as not started, but I developed a scope in the spring, but it didn't progress after that. So there has been work on this one. It just hasn't gone anywhere. That's the biggest point there. In the previous slide, there's two projects that are effectively completed. They're just ongoing now at this point. It's the interdepartmental working group, which began meeting in April. That was something that I'm now chairing and working on. And every time that we've something comes up where we need to try and put something through this group, call a meeting. It's roughly every quarter. Then it's the shoreline change monitoring. This got started pretty much before the CRP was approved, after it was finalized, but before it was approved by Select Board. Myself and Morgan Sale, the Coastal Resources technician, have been working on this, and we were out both yesterday and we're going out again today to get this month's updates. We try and get these things towards the start of the month, as I've said a few times before, and I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. December, January, I'm going to get this up in the town website in a nice presentable format, so we can start seeing erosion lines as in kind of, I want to say something like more real time, monthly-ish, roughly speaking. We know that, just to point it out quite simply, a lot of these things have gone through quite a lot of work, say the downtown neighborhood flood barrier. That's done a lot of work. There's other things that have started development as well, such as the sediment transport study. That's a big one. And the stormwater management plan, I am tangentially involved in that one for the sake of argument. But other things like the joint staff working group, that's only in development simply because I have the interdepartmental the interdepartmental working group working on it now, but that's not formally taken up. It's just on the next agenda. So that's how I'm able to call that one in development. Pretty much everything else you've either known about or seen in one way, shape or form. And there are things in here that might be in twice, but I've called in development. The downtown neighborhood flood barrier is the overarching process, but we have also got the phase 1 project, which is what we did for Easy Street and the bottom of Broad Street for the most recent grant application. There's a lot on this slide as well. The Ames Avenue Bridge resilience. This is something that was started during the development of the CRP because people had an interest in it at the time. The one that I'm kind of wanted to call done for the longest time, and I wanted to let it in here as a complete, but I realized that it's going to be an ongoing study. We had an initial part completed in the spring with we had a presentation from Woods Whole Group. Thank you to Jen for organizing that one, by the way. And for a while I was calling this completed until I realized there was more parts to it. That's why there's only one green sentence in here, and I've put it back into development because it's not finished. What else is in here that's of interest? The Baxter Road relocation plan. This is well underway. That's a contract that I'm running at the moment. That is one of the more interesting things. It's about what, about 10 months into its 12 to 18 month development. What else was interesting? The sewer department, I'm working with them to try and see if we can't do some of the dune restoration work that's obviously extremely needed there. I last week was invited to work with Parks and Recreation to work on their redevelopment of Tom Nevers Field. So that's one of the newest ones that's just started into the development process. And then Sheep Pond Road, that's moving along nicely. It's not a study, but it is relocating in kind of a slightly more ad hoc way that has been more in keeping with the previous moves that have happened there. And all I can do again is say thanks to NCF. Lots not started, but with, sorry, Mary, just also to kind of point out that the ones that are not started are generally speaking much later timeframes, and you'll see things in here like anticipated for 2026, anticipated for 2024. So it is broadly in keeping with our timelines from the CRP, and to have roughly half done or underway, as mostly underway within a year in a 15-year plan, we're doing well.
Thank you, Vincent. You anticipated what I was going to ask. If we want to go back to the first slide, could we just do a quick review of things that are priority one and are not started? And as you pointed out, some of them are not expected to start right away, but I think it'd just be helpful to take a quick run through and see if there's any that need some help.
Sure. Let's start at the top then. Community outreach and on property owner resilience and best practice. I mentioned at a CRAC meeting not so long ago that this might be something that CRAC could take up as something for the committee to do, similar to how the education working group worked a number of years ago. This could be something that the committee could actually undertake themselves if that was of interest to the committee. Update to the zoning bylaw. This is to be led by Plus. I need to have better contacts with Plus. There aren't enough hours in the day. Other priority ones that are not started, coastal resilience and sustainability program. So in my mind, I'm starting to wonder if this is going to be something for the new sustainability program manager, if that will fit under that role, if that makes any sense.
Right, that position is new since the coastal resilience plan was finalized, so that was not anticipated.
Correct, but that's kind of where I'm seeing that one go. The sediment budget, I need the sediment transport study to be completed before I can start the sediment budget. It's as simple as that. It's a cause and effect type thing.
Hang on,
Yep.
going back, when does the sediment transport go to bid? Is that, I've asked that question, I haven't heard an answer yet. Do you know?
I've written the scope of services. It's gone to procurement with a group of other things that NRD has written up. I can't answer it, Matt, sorry. That's a finance department question.
All right, so I'll ask Brian.
Please.
I will, you got it.
Thank you, Matt.
Priority ones that aren't started. Steamboat Wharf, I think, is the next one. Remember in January, we spoke to the director, Bob, what was Bob's second name? Bob Davis, and he said that they're about 6 to 8 years away. And I think it's probably wise for us to try and follow their timeline, get the downtown area start underway for the resilience and get the downtown area, downtown neighborhood flood barrier underway, while also planning with this in mind. But once they're ready to start work on it in 6 to 8 years, they said towards the end of the decade, then I think that's probably where we should be as well. But I'm happy to take any input that the committee has or what we might be able to do in the meantime, or at least work this into any other plans in the exact same area. I don't know, like the stormwater management plan for the sake of argument. That's in development. That's priority 3s and 2s. Beg pardon, gonna go down a slide. Okay, priority 1 up here, not started. Madikit road raising and bridge conversion. So this one, Matt will be able to remember quite well. There was this wonderful idea when they were talking about sewering Madikit that if you're going to disturb the roads, why wouldn't you include this in it? It was a terrific idea. It was nothing on paper at the time. It was about as far as it went. But then that sewer question changed and became more of a build-out analysis question at the time to understand sewering Madikit and the implications. And because it changed to a build-out analysis, the part about the Madikit road raising fell off the agenda, quite frankly. That's my remembering of it. If you want to correct me, Matt, I'd happily take that.
No, it sounds about right.
Fair enough. All right. Public Works Facility. This is a different question that I'm not even going to begin to get into. It's about where Public Works should be. There's a question about relocating it. That question should be probably answered first before we even begin to tackle resilience for the whole site. If we could even downgrade it to just being resilience for the landfill, that might make things a bit easier. If the DPW is relocated, then you end up having land that you could use for resilience purposes. So, but you need to understand what the DPW is doing first. And I'm going to happily say that I am 2 or 3 pay grades below that decision. If that isn't unfair. Priority 1 not started. Numerical modeling study for code 2. This is has had work on it. Hang on, no. This is for breaching. Sorry, beg your pardon. Yes, this has had no real work, and I'm kind of curious if this shouldn't be linked with the mitigation and Dune project. And I guess maybe Jen and I can talk on the side about this one. I think that is that an okay way of dealing with it? I don't mean to unload this issue, but seeing as how it's related to that property, I think is the proper way forward.
And I think that was the last priority 1 that's not started.
Yeah, I think Jen wanted to say something.
Jen?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. As you're going through this, Vince, and I'm thinking about how projects and properties and how all this evolves, it's that thinking about the one that's in development with the CO2 erosion mitigation and resiliency, the numerical model will eventually fall out of it. So figuring out how it's like you have status, but maybe we need a couple levels to the status. I was also thinking with the resiliency project, an initial studies completed, and then of course, because we have grad students and other stuff involved, and things will be put in place, analyzed, figure out what works, and then it goes on to the next stage. Okay, let's implement X, Y, and Z. You might maybe in the future, not right now, to put more work on your plate, but thinking about how we assess these, maybe there's levels to your status, phase 1 done, or X, Y, Z done. And then I do think, like you said, the numerical modeling, we can figure out how we can implement that with what's going on already, but that's an additive project, I think, to some of the other research work that's happening. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jen. Just a reminder that in the coastal resilience plan, not all of the priority 1 projects were expected to start right away. So there's definitely some tiering of when things would start with some dependencies. This project has to be done before that project. So this is not the only way of looking at the project status. Thank you, Jen, for pointing that out.
It's Matt. I have a quick
Yeah.
comment on Public Works. I
Yes.
think I would say that this committee has had a impact on that, and thinking about coastal resiliency has had the administration start to rethink. It's going into there's a committee that's working on what are we going to do in the landfill in 2025. How do we handle the waste? It's sort of informed a lot of it. There was $16-20 million. It was going to be a bunch of buildings, and it really this committee and sort of this whole topic got everyone to say, well, wait a minute, is that the smartest way to spend it? And if we're not going to build it there, where are we going to build it? So it really, I think, so in some ways it is started, but not much is, and sort of the questions really are going to be, are we going to hard armor the landfill? Are we going to hard armor that to keep, the pollutants from going out into the system, or what, or is there something else we're going to do? And those issues are being sort of looked at right now. So in a lot of ways, it is started. It's just going to take longer.
Thank you, Matt. Other comments or questions about the status of the projects?
Well, thank you, Vince, for putting this together. It's encouraging at this and hopefully inspiring to do some more work. Go back. So the next item on our agenda, approval of
Mary?
minutes. Yes, Peter.
This is just a technical question. But Vince, if it's possible, when you send us those long matrix files, can you somehow send them so that they're horizontal, or send them as a PDF so then we can rotate them? Because I tried within Word to rotate it and it split them in half so I couldn't see all the comments.
Okay, how about I send out this to all committee members now as the PowerPoint that it is, and you can use it whatever you want.
I didn't need to see it again. I'm just saying in the future, so that when I click on it, I can see it and I don't have to spend time manipulating it. And that's
Sure,
all.
no problem.
Thank you.
If you have any problems along the way, just let me know, because I usually have ways of fixing things pretty quickly.
Okay,
Sorry that happened to you.
no worries.
Thanks, Vince. Matt.
Just a quick comment. I sent a email to Brian Turbot and asked, where the bid is on sediment transport. And I have a quick question, Vince. I'm assuming that sediment transport is island-wide, right? Is that what we're doing? Is we're looking at it island-wide?
Looking at the money available.
We're looking at for the study is island-wide, or is it
No.
for a specific area? What are we doing
Yes.
and why?
At the moment, the way that the scope was written to try and make best use of the budget available and not try and dilute the results by trying to get lower grade information by going for a greater area. We looked at just the harbours initially so that we could understand what dredging might need to be done in the harbours for navigation as well as anything else. So the initial part of it is going to be Nantucket Harbour and Madaket Harbour. And then there might have to be additional phases for the south and east shore afterwards. Jen and I had pitched around the idea of doing something in Code 2, on the outside of Code 2 as well, in the core of the bay, that area, to try and increase the value for that area. But that's an ongoing conversation. But it's based on getting high level quality information that we need for the sediment budget. Because if there's no point in getting low quality information in the sediment transport study that then doesn't feed well into the sediment budget.
Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Just a quick question, Vince, because you're talking about like the finances dictating the need for a smaller area. What's the ballpark on the whole island, like doing it the way we want to? So like, if we're like looking for grant opportunities or something, what's the ballpark on that? Because I think if anytime we do like piecemeal, I mean, the benefit of being in a whole island is that we have a closed system.
Mhm.
So in the sense of like, we're not Provincetown, we're not Chatham, we're not other areas that do piecemeal it because they have a, municipal boundary. We have the whole island. It makes way more sense to do it all at once. If we piecemeal it, it's gonna be way more expensive in the long run. How do we move it forward, or like, what is that budget? What is the big picture?
The money that was approved at town meeting in May was about $500,000 only. So that's not nearly enough. It would probably, we don't have a full costing for the full outline of the island, harbours and Atlantic facing coastline and Nantucket Sound facing coastline. That is going to be excessive. And plus, when you try and look at the companies that are out there that do these kind of things, you have to try and figure out, well, what can they reasonably get done in a 1-year study timeframe? Otherwise, they're going to end up maybe potentially doing the same study for like 4 or 5 years, and then we get outdated before we get to the end of the project. There's a whole scoping issue because it might come across as a small island, but it's not, especially when you look at our exterior coastline for the south, for the Atlantic facing coastline parts. They're massive, massive areas and too big for people to take on in some ways.
All right, I think just as an advocate of like moving forward different projects, I would say if we're gonna piecemeal it, then future grants, I think would be really good to focus on this. I honestly missed several meetings, so maybe I missed this, but I thought we were actually doing more of the island. So I think in order to be useful for all of the projects that we're talking about, I think these are compelling projects for grants. They are quote unquote shovel ready, if we're already ready to do, if we're already appropriating money for like the harbor, then I'm just kind of advocating that we, you know, instead of kind of looking at different grant opportunities all along, this is for the whole island and it would benefit so many different projects, municipal and private, and, you know, so anyway, just, just put it out there. I think this is a higher priority than we've been talking about.
Thank you, Sarah.
Literally focusing on the most precious areas first.
Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just, I got a comment. I would like to be bidding the entire island and then cutting back. You know, I worry that, you know, sometimes we've done this before where we do part of it, but then we're not doing another part. And why didn't you do this section? And we've got a lot of, you know, a lot of people, a lot of concerns in Mattocket, a lot of concerns on the South Shore that we're on hold again until we get another town meeting. If we do it this way, we're on hold till we get another town meeting vote, or we get money from the state, we get a grant or a vote, and that's putting us 2-3 years out again. So I think it's something that we've been sort of telling everyone we were gonna do, that this is gonna be phase one and we're gonna do it. And here we are, and we're only gonna do the inner harbors. I think we're making a mistake myself. I just assumed that we were doing a sediment transport study for the island. And if we don't put it out there and ask, how do we know what people can come in with from a price point? So.
Sarah?
Yeah, just following up on what Matt said, I think honestly, being forthcoming to the community, we vote, you know, in voting on it at town meeting for the appropriations of the $500,000 or whatever it was, I think people recognize this is important. It informs all these different projects, you know, like from Baxter Road to Mattocket, you know, if we do the whole island, I understand it's expensive, but just saying that it's excessive is not an actual number. I think we need to price it out so that we know if where and what phases can be, if it needs to be phased out, then we know, okay, we need $500,000 for the inner harbor. We need $1 million for the Coatue in the North Shore, whatever it is, because then we know what we're asking for, what we're looking for. Just kind of following up on what Matt said, because then even if, you know, when people come to us and say, oh, we're not doing the whole island or we need this information, if we have it phased out as a plan, if we're just doing, I don't know, I'm concerned because I actually did think that we were doing more, or at least that there was a plan to do the rest.
Sorry.
We're never gonna get to the
Just
sediment budget if we're not doing the transport study.
Sorry, I'm going to be trying to be really clear on this if I can, Mary. There's two elements to it. I spoke with Arcadis and I tried to understand two big things. The money we had available, also the companies that are available to do this. Like to get the high quality information we want, there's no company big enough. That's another major concern. So just have to bear that in mind. Like, we're not a small island. It is, in some ways, it feels like a small island, but our waterway systems are enormous. And to try and get a company that has the technical ability, the experience, the equipment, the time, the personnel to do big areas like harbors, that's kind of possible. To do the whole island in one go, we lose massive data quality and would take a great deal longer to do all in one go. And by the end of it, you have almost irrelevant or unusable data because it becomes so old by the end of the project. To do it in a piecemeal fashion, as has been said here, you end up getting better quality data that can feed into the next thing, such as the sediment budget. We can then say, if you do the outer areas of the island, then understand the sediment budget for that area secondary again. But it's a two-part problem: the money available and the companies available.
So setting aside the question of whether it's, because it almost sounds, Vince, like you're saying it's not possible to do the Atlantic coast because nobody can do it. Setting that aside for a moment, I have to agree with Sarah that it is important that we have a plan, that we know how much this is going to cost, that we know that once we do phase one, we have phase two and we have phase three, or however many phases, because I see a real danger in not being able to either find the funding or find the project manager or find the will to move forward with these other phases if we haven't started to say,
it's going to cost X amount of dollars, it's going to take X number of years, and we're going to get the whole island done in these number of phases. I also did not understand that this was a very limited study. But I think that what happened is we allocated money at town meeting without any idea of what that money was going to buy us. And I agree, we need to know what we're looking at. Joe, and I think Ian must also had a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think we have to have a whole plan put together and it may be itemized and broken out. And I hear, Vince, that there's may not be a company to do the entire project, but maybe there's several companies to be doing it. And I hate to say that, and this would be a problem that Matt would hear is, oh, we're taking care of sconce and we're not taking care of Madigan. I think we can kind of, you know, come in many different directions and get as much information as and bids and cost and timelines. And yeah, it may be several companies doing this because I think the need is getting really now and soon that will need to be implementing some of these projects. And so I think that we should be looking at the broad and the entire island and doing it all as one shot. And then just if we have to break it out to different companies, and then it gets broken out. I think that's really some way we need to be looking at this. So thank you.
If I can, Mary.
Yeah, Vince.
Yeah, that's fine, but then you got to make sure that all companies are using the same methods and materials and getting that in order, which is larger and problematic. But at the moment, you know, for what you're talking about, I only have 500,000. I can't make that 500,000 do any more than it can do. So I don't. If you want to do more, I don't have funds. Like, what do we do? Do we part the funds that we've already committed to spending for FY23, and then try and get more money and add to it? That gets into a whole procurement problem that I have. That is much harder to answer. You know, we have the money we have, and we have areas that are greater need. So that's what I had been progressing with, and then we can add other areas over time that are also great need, but not as immense need as the harbors.
So we have, I'll say coincidentally, this is the time when we can suggest items for town meeting. And so my concern is that we don't let that opportunity pass if we know that we need money to do something that is essential for many of the other coastal resilience projects. So that's a question, you know, whether we ask the select board to do that. I don't think we have time to put an article together on our own. We have just a couple of days before citizen deadline. I'm not quite sure what the process is going through the department. But I think that's something we should take a very close look at, is whether we need to request an additional amount of funding, hopefully an amount that is linked to a particular step in this process, not just a random amount, so that we know that it will be effective. But you know, if we need more than the 500,000, then I think we should be trying to make sure that there is additional money in the next budget to keep this project going.
Just sorry, I don't want to keep interrupting. I just wanted to say I'm just trying to be responsible with the resources I have, and I am only one guy. I need more people to do a lot of what you're asking, and I need, you know, many more contracts and assistant type positions that I don't have.
Yeah, I think we're getting a picture of the limitations that shape the decision, and I respect that. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I just wanted to add to this a little bit because, you know, as Vince mentioned, we had the foundation had spoken with him and the trustees as well about how we could be additive to the work that he was proposing to look at, you know, the sediment analysis within the harbor, and if we could, you know, pair up to help do similar things for the outside of Coatue and the East Beach as far as it relates to the refuge. One of the things we had talked about was understanding the limitations of doing a study this size, but and you know, this might happen when Vince puts out the RFP, but the potential of indicating that there was a future plan to do the entire island so that a consultant that would apply for it could have that within their not necessarily their scope that we would contract for, but that would be a way to get the data done in the same manner, continuously by potentially using the same consultant over time to do the work that has to be done, and that if it's, you know, a potential of what the funding is, that, you know, that's the limitation that, you know, Vince has to work with this year with scoping out the harbor. If the consultant that gets the RFP has the capacity to do more in the same year, then that would be, okay, what else could be added on by looking at outside organizations or funders to be able to add those pieces in. So just to add that to the conversation, that had been part of it, but we're waiting on what happens with the town's RFP process and picking you know, selecting a consultant to do the work based on the funding that they currently have. But I think there's the potential by leveraging whatever consultant gets picked to turn this into a phased project around the island.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going, to be honest.
So we'll go to Ian, and then Christy also had a hand up, and then we have some further comments. We are still on the topic of updates on the status of the CRP recommendations.
So thank you, Mary. I don't really have much to add. Like what Sarah's point that, you know, it's going to cost a lot more if it's done piecemeal. Joe's point that it really needs to be done as quickly as possible, and your point, Mary, which is emphasize that. And so I guess my question, well, I feel that I haven't been paying enough attention because I thought we were getting much more for the money. And so I have two questions, I guess. First of all, why not just park the $500,000 and find out how much we really need to do the island, and then go back and ask for that amount, rather than more or less, rather than adding so much in the long run. And secondly, how do we go about finding out how much it is really going to cost to do the whole island? I mean, I really feel I've been asleep at the switch. I thought that we were, you know, grappling with doing the whole island when this came up originally with the original funding. So I'm somewhat embarrassed to find out it's, you know, doing something that, well, that in some ways is, from my limited perspective, has limited relevance because, you know, like the Grossman Channel for Manicat, once you can't get out, you know, you bring in the dredgers. Until then, you know, we've got other issues that we're dealing with that I think are much more existential when you look at the outside of the island rather than the harbors. Thank you.
If
Thank
I
you,
might, Mary.
Ian. Vince, you can reply, and then we'll go to Christy.
Thank you. Very briefly, I'm trying to be super clear. There are no companies big enough to do everything in one go. I feel like I've been extremely clear in that point. And if we group up companies, it just becomes more complicated, and you end up having to have more people to run a large project like that. We don't have it. It's also, I'm also remembering another part to it as well. We're also doing the harbor plan update. They'll happen about the same time. So having the two plans, one for the harbor for the sediment transport study, and the other for the harbor for the harbor plan update, happening at the same time, there's enormous value in that to try and stuff more in and trying to get more out of it. We can't make the $500,000 go any further than what it can do. And if you do, you end up with, forgive me, a crappier product. It's not, there's no value in getting a bad product to cover more area. If you want to park the money to wait to try and see how much it'll all cost, that would be a large number. But then the companies that would probably apply for it would break it down anyway, because they're not big enough. They would want to do it in phases. They'd want to do the critical areas first and then the other areas afterwards. We can argue that everywhere is critical, but somewhere has to get the priority. And if we rely on so much boat traffic, even just our ferries coming and going, we need to understand what's going on there first. Our harbors are the most crucial.
So Vince, just a quick point of information. How long do you expect the sediment transport study as proposed to take?
Oh, that's a good question. It was more than a year. It was closer to year and a half off the top of my head. I don't have a perfect answer to that, no.
Okay.
It was a year and a half.
I just wanted to get, if it was 5 years or 5 months, some kind of indication.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
it's more than a year. A year and a half is what I have in my head.
We're going to go to Christy and then Sarah.
Yeah, just a comment, just to chime in, to Vince's point, I think that you have, you have some significant needs areas to where I don't think you would have any comments from public as to why you're not doing certain or other parts of the island. I think we all agree that island-wide would be a great thing, but I think it sounds like from Vince's commentary that there is steps that we're looking at that, or at least a company that can do the work sooner than later, as opposed to spending a little extra time to try to find someone that can do island-wide. But I do think that the data that you can generate from this immediate action would be beneficial going forward to an island-wide effort. So I'm kind of supporting him in that, pushing forward on what is existing or what we have down already.
Thank you, Christy. Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with Christy. I think from what I'm hearing, no one is saying that we should dilute the $500,000. I think choosing, with the limited amount of money, choosing the harbor is the best decision to move forward. I think what I'm hoping that this committee can help you with, Vince, is even in whatever stage we're at now with the procurement and, whenever they start, and in using that intervening year, a year and a half to piece out what the priorities are for the other areas, and thinking both timeline and cost, maybe. I think we want, when I'm saying island wide, I understand what you're saying completely about it. It's not possible to do it all at once, but I think we need to have that plan for geographically, what are the different areas, and this section is how much we can do for $500,000, and then this section is what we could do for $1 million, and have it actually more shovel ready. And when I say that, I just mean ready to go, because just as you were saying, Vince, if that contractor that we use for the harbor gets to a certain point and they can go further, or they are interested in the project, or having it okay, great, if you are, next step would be, I don't know, Madigan. I can making up what the next step would be, but I feel the strength of this committee and being part of the CRP for so long, helping figure out what the priority areas are, maybe is something that we could do to help you. Obviously, we can't tell you how much things are going to cost, but and recognizing that the numbers that you get this year aren't going to be the same and exactly the same for the next year to 2 years, but you got to have those ready so that when the right grant comes along, or when we know what to ask for this from the town and things like that. I just think definitely you made the right choice with harbor being first, because it's almost a closed system in itself, but I feel we can help with thinking through what the next pieces are, but we got to have that plan in place. And I know that you're super busy and you need help. Maybe this is a way to get more help, is we can do more, but we need help. But also maybe some other things don't need to be done right now. We had that huge list of things that are in progress, and I would personally support pausing on some of those to make this happen in a more quicker fashion.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so part of our agenda item was the discussion of year 2 priorities. So I think we will definitely be talking more about that. And thank you, Sarah, for providing some direction there. Ian, you had a question?
Yes. Well, only in as much as that, by that 500,000, Vince, can you put 50,000 aside to hire an assistant to help you deal with all this?
If only it were that easy, right, Vince?
If only. I just want to say one more simple thing quickly. We just did a very cursory kind of assessment of the companies that are out there that might be capable of the kind of equipment and personnel that they had. That's one of the reasons that we did I did what I did, but it wasn't in any kind of a detailed look. It's kind of like you look at what they've done before, what their capabilities are, their team size, and that kind of stuff. You kind of have a general cursory call, hey, who's interested? But I have to say openly and clearly, I have no preferred candidate in any of this. Just to say for procurement, I just was looking at out there who does this kind of work. And then once I saw that and what the kind of stuff that they did that was comparable, that was worrying.
Vince,
Normally
is
these are much smaller areas.
Is it possible that we will get no bids back for $500,000 to do the work that you've scoped?
Anything like that is possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely possible. Fair enough. But I know there's one or two companies in the Cape area that are interested in this kind of thing. Yes. I don't want to name names if that's all right at this point,
Yeah.
but I can say two.
Yeah, Christy, and then we'll go to some members of the public that have comments to offer.
Mary, I was just checking to see if you saw the comment from Deanne.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good.
I recognize Deanne Atherton and then RJ Turcott.
Thank you, Mary, and hello, members of the committee. I'm speaking on behalf of the Coastal Conservancy. We have been very much an advocate of a island-wide sediment transport study, and we have received a copy of a proposal that apparently was prepared for the town. It doesn't have a date, but I believe it was 2020. And it was prepared by a very reputable regional company. And I can send a copy to you all. It is for a 2-phased project. And it's for the entire island, 45 miles. And the budget, it's in 2 phases, and it's a 3-year project. And the total of the phases is $425 to $525. Now, I don't know what happened. I don't know if this was formally submitted. I think it was. And it was done by a company that has done a number of projects in the Cape and Islands area.
Deanne, if you want to provide that to Vince, he can let you know whether or not it's something he's already received.
I can say now I have it.
Okay.
Did you misspeak, Deanne, when you said $450, or did I mishear you?
Oh, you misheard me. It was $450,000. But it's within the budget of the appropriation of town meeting. I am not qualified in any way to say, you know, the level of this service compared with what other companies would do. But this is certainly an organization that has a very excellent reputation and knows Nantucket well.
Thank you, Deanne. RJ?
Thank you, Chair Longacre, RJ Turcott for the Nantucket Land Council. As far as the sediment transport study goes, it is going to be enormous, and it's going to take a village. And I was wondering if Vince, if you had a chance to look at the San Francisco Bay Delta and the work that's being done there, because that's a watershed that supplies much of Northern California, and it's about 75,000 square miles, and it's taken them over a decade, but with the federal government and nonprofits and local communities sort of chipping in and putting data together, they have a pretty good hydrodynamic model. It's mostly for climate change issues, and they're dealing with droughts and forest fires. And obviously for Nantucket, it would be looking more for resilience, but it can be done on an enormous scale. It does take a long time, but one of the biggest things this committee can do is, as you appropriate funds and figure out how to piece this together for the entire island, when you send things out to bid, you get to decide what format you want the data to be in. And when they come back with an offer on whether it's the harbor or anywhere else for sediment transport, they have to agree to that. So one of the biggest things this committee can do is make sure that the data comes in the same way if it takes multiple companies. And it's called the Cascade model, which is just another one of these horrible acronyms for the San Francisco Bay Delta, but I can put the link in the chat. I think it's really fascinating, and it's a good example of the amount of data and the amount of folks involved with doing a project of this scale. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Please do not use the chat. It's not captured by the recording. Please email directly to Vince.
Yeah.
Will do. Okay.
I can then distribute to members. I actually know this project a little bit. It's a state level and federal level work that is, as RJ said, it's a massive area. It's a huge project. And RJ is correct in everything he's saying, and I don't want to contradict him, but I do frequently like to point out we're just a town in a state, not a state yet.
We have made attempts. There's actually on Broad Street there, I think one of the bike shops is flying the secession flag that Martha's Vineyard created in the 70s. It was an interesting drive-by moment. Okay, I think that we have exhausted that discussion. Before we move on, were there any other comments on the recommendations in the CRP and year 2 priorities? All right, seeing none.
Mary, if I could.
Yes,
Sorry,
Vince.
I hate to be the one that's always doing it. I do have a couple of things that I want to turn into year 2 priorities. The downtown flood barrier is one of them. That is something that we're going to have to drive forward. We weren't successful, so that has to be a year 2 priority. There's a stormwater management plan that is currently in research that I'd like to push forward. That's something that sewer department are working on, and I'm like angling to have myself heavily involved in, and would like to have this committee involved in too. And then there's something that nothing has really happened with, the zoning. I'd like to see something happen with zoning, because that's going to become a greater and greater conversation. And then you might remember a number of weeks ago, a number of crack meetings ago, there was the strategic retreat and relocation program that we were talking about, or strategic retreat and relocation plan or program. It kind of has a variable title. That is another thing that is going to be a massive thing, and I'm starting to push forward on that. I want the committee to be aware of that one too, and that is something I'm trying to see if I can work up something on. It will be another one of these things that we kind of have to have as one of these key things to know where to make a stand and where to start retreat planning for. And it's about cost benefit analysis and understanding where is a good place to invest in at least resilience measures in the interim or slightly longer term phases. And when there's something like conservation land, you know, something we don't have to necessarily plan for doing much with, so we can allow to retreat, stuff like that, but putting numbers to it that we don't have at the moment. That's going to be another big one for me in the coming year.
Thank you, Vince. Ian?
Thank you, Mary. If I could just ask one question to through you to Vince. So the study that Deanne was mentioning, did you say you were aware of that? And was there a decision made not to pursue it?
So that was one cost estimate that was received from one company. That was just to get a guiding figure. We had to review the document, understand the content of it, what they were proposing in that time frame, to understand the costings that they were talking about in that time frame. That company could well bid on what we put out for for the sediment transport study, but there were elements in it that were probably lacking. It seemed like a low-end bid, but they're not the only company out there, and I don't want to do something that is focused on getting one particular result. That's something you can't do under procurement. You have to follow procurement law, and you have to do a general thing. You can't write something for one company.
No, I understand, and I just the disconnect between the price that may or may not at one level be sufficient for a harbor analysis as opposed to an estimate for doing 46 miles of coastline, or however many miles it actually is. I've just glanced at it. Just it seems to be, you know, at such a different level of magnitude that I'm puzzled. I guess you could call me puzzled at this point.
Yeah, the part of the disconnect is time. So that number of 500,000 have been floating around for quite a while because of that report, and that's what made it in. That's what got approved. And then once we started looking at it in more detail to see what was generally industry standard, for the sake of argument, not necessarily for one company, but industry standard across many companies, then we realized the disconnect and where the what the 500,000 could actually do, as opposed to what one company proposed 2.5, 3 years ago at this point.
And I'll just remind us that we had a company propose to give us a coastal resilience plan for $25,000. And
Okay.
that would not have given us the detail of the plan that we did receive and paid much more for. Okay, third try at moving on to the next agenda item. That is approval of the minutes from October 11 and 25. Those minutes were not distributed with the packet. And so I'm proposing that we move this agenda item to our next meeting to give us time to review them. There were some requests for additional information to complete the minutes. So I think we should take the time to do that. Any objection to passing over this item? Not seeing any. Next item is public comment. So is there additional public comment? You can just go ahead and unmute.
Mary?
Deanne Atherton.
Sorry, I was just leaving the room. Yes, I wanted to just bring up the question of sand. And I'm wondering if sort of what's the status of the sand bank that the town decided to set up. And the first supply of sand was the dredged sand from Pulpus Harbor. And I don't know if all of that sand has been sold or whether we just have any sand on hand at all.
So let's put that on the next agenda for a response. That seems like it requires quite a bit of detail. But thank you for
Thank you, Mary. That would be very helpful.
If there is no further public comment, new business committee and natural resources department reports, noting that the net zero conference held by the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, there is a link for that website, and we did send out by email a link to the recording of that conference. That was extremely interesting. I was able to watch the whole thing. Vince was a presenter and part of it. And we'll include the link for the recording in the next agenda for the public, or I'm sure you can find it from the link to their website. Vince, anything else going on to report on?
No, that's it.
Okay, and then any reports from other committee members? Or Vince, did I cut you off?
Nope.
Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I think that Vince, you sent out a link, and if you didn't, I'll send it again. But the Friday before last, we did a presentation with the Boston University student that's working on the erosion and kind of sediment movement issues out on the refuge on Coscataco 2. There's a link to the presentation if you missed the webinar, and then there's also a few other links in there. One that I would really highly recommend everyone look at is there's kind of a PDF. We have a graduate student that's working out there. She's using ground penetrating radar to help understand how sediment used to move around the refuge, where there's been breaches in the past, and then she's doing elevation modeling. The presentation was really good. It's very technical information, but she presented it really well. So from an erosion and resiliency standpoint, I would recommend taking a look at all the links that were in there. And if Vince, you didn't send that out, I can send it to you again, but I thought you got it.
I did not. Could you send it to me and I'll send it to the committee and for Sarah to put into the minutes.
Into the minutes. I will do that. And when it comes across your email, I definitely recommend taking a look at it, everyone. It's easily digestible and very interesting.
Thank you, Jen. Other committee reports, Ian?
So Jen, that sounds fascinating. Thank you. And yeah, it's a Concom. I think we're having a public discussion on this coming Thursday on the reaction to the select board's response to the letter that we sent them 2 weeks ago. So it's going to be in public session rather than an executive session if people are interested.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
That reminds me that Vince and I will be attending the select board meeting tomorrow to present the second quarter report that the committee has previously approved. So just a heads up on that. Other committee reports. All right, if there are none, a discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics. So we're meeting November 22nd, December 13th, not planning on meeting on December 27th. As I mentioned, there's several items that we talked about today that will come back for the next agenda item. But one that I wanted the committee's feedback on is having just looked at the 40 recommendations for the coastal resilience plan. One idea would be to look at them the way that they are grouped. So they're grouped by area. And we could go back to the various civic associations and other stakeholders in each area and get their feedback on the recommendations that were made for their area and what their priorities are and how they can participate in the process. So we can do a series of meetings featuring one area per meeting to do that. And if that sounds like a good idea, we'll start setting that up. Seeing some head nods. Any other comments on that? All right, thank you. Any other potential agenda items? Always happy to include people's suggestions. And if there are none, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Matt.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Roll call vote. Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Ian Golding.
Sorry, what am I?
Motion to adjourn, Ian.
Our garden is, our irrigation system is being blown out without warning, and there's something I need to talk to them about. So my apologies. So yes, aye.
Thank you. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longinger, aye. Thank you all. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.